Hello everybody and welcome back to Red Eagle Politics. Make sure you guys like this video down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So we have been talking a lot about the 2026 midterms, and rightfully so because they're right around the corner. But coming even sooner, we have some statewide elections later this year, this November. You have New Jersey. We've touched on New Jersey a little bit, and we will continue to touch on New Jersey, but also the state of Virginia. We have to talk about Virginia because it's been a little bit more of a discussed topic if Republicans are going to be capable of going out there and winning this governorship, which again, it's kind of seen in a lot of people's eyes as a foregone conclusion that the Democrats are going to win it. But when you have that situation, usually the Democrats begin to be caught a little off guard. And that was kind of what happened in 2021 with Glenn Youngkin. Glenn Youngkin, the current governor, he's very popular. Now you have Winsome Sears, his lieutenant governor, trying to tie herself to Youngkin, which is what she should have really done from the get-go. But is it really working? Well, according to the polling, it's getting closer. It's really getting closer. And you could see this here because the poll showed previously in May that Spanberger, who is this Democrat, she is somebody who tries to pass herself off as a moderate, but she's not. She's a part of that 2018 wave of Democrats, like in the suburbs and in certain areas. They would strategically run these candidates and basically groom these candidates. A lot of them were like intelligence assets and part of like the CIA, and she definitely is. She definitely is deep state Spanberger, but she has a lot of resources, and we know that. I said from the get-go, back at the beginning of the year, she'll be very difficult to beat. And Winsome Sears was running a lackluster campaign for a while, as I predicted, but now she's starting to get a little bit more fire under her. And you could see this because the gap went from 17 points to 7 points in a few months. And if that continues to close at the rate that it's closing at, that would be good news. Also, Spanberger still below 50%, meaning that there are enough undecideds that possibly could go in the Republican column. Now, keep in mind, Virginia is a state that down ballot is a little bit redder than it is at the top of the ticket, and it's been that way for quite some time, ever since the Obama years pretty much. Before that, it was a red state, but the DC suburbs have changed, and of course, trends have kicked in, and they worked against Republicans in the Trump era, but then you kind of see these areas begin to move to the right because certain other demographics are, shifting Republican, and the rurals are getting like redder and maxed out. So it's not like Republicans are incapable of winning the state if everything goes right. But again, we'll see what happens because there's so much more time between now and the election. And when you look at the polling, it's still not looking that great for Winsome Sears, all things considered. She has yet to lead a single poll. You have polls that have her, down by 7, and obviously the poll before that was over a month ago, but had her down by 10. So she is probably closing the gap, and it's a good thing Spanberger is below 50, and it could get closer. But I will say that for a 2021 upset like style thing to happen, I just don't think the recipe is there, because you look at 2021, you had Terry McAuliffe trip over himself, you had education and the Loudoun County incident, and so many things helping Glenn Youngkin that just were the perfect storm for him to go out there, capture the momentum, retake Virginia. You had all of the anger about these mandates that were still going on. Republicans almost flipped New Jersey. I don't know if we're going to see that in Virginia again. And Sears is somebody that the Trump base initially was not really a big fan of because, after the midterm, she threw him under the bus, and that possibly could hurt her with turnout. I don't know if it's going to hurt that much because a lot of the people that would care about that probably do tend to be voters that don't usually vote as often on the off years. Maybe they voted for Youngkin, but when it comes down to it, there's not really anything that's going to energize Republicans. Because if you look at 2021, this point in time, Monmouth put out a poll that showed the Democrats up by, in a certain likely voter sample by just 2 points. The other sample was by 7. So, you did see this wall that was hit. And maybe you could say that there's a chance Spanberger goes out there and hits that same level of a wall where she's not going above 50%, but she's above 50% in several polls. And if you want to look at the Roanoke College poll, if there is one, well, technically, that's interesting because you had Glenn Youngkin trail by more than Sears is trailing by with the same amount of undecideds. But still, I don't know what's going to carry the momentum. You did have this incident, though, take place at a rally for Winsome Sears. You had protesters, and one of these people was a staffer for Abigail Spanberger holding up this sign that said, "Hey, Winsome, if trans can't share your bathroom, then blacks can't share my water fountain." So you do have this very strange conglomeration of somebody's political ideology, and it's not really the best look for the Spanberger campaign. But at the same time, we understand there was the whole Ralph Norman blackface incident. It didn't really impact his approval among Democrat voters for a very long time. Didn't hurt him among black voters either. And on top of it, it's this is some staffer. It's not Spanberger herself that's doing it. But do I think it could maybe, I don't know, get people talking about the race and boost turnout, which probably helps Winsome Sears? Yes, I think that it could, and that would be something that would come out of it that's positive. But still, you talk about the fact it's an off-year election. This was still a D plus 5.8% state. Trump did better in certain parts of Northern Virginia. He did better, obviously, in rural Virginia. Republicans keep doing better in the latter for sure. They've been doing it under Trump. But it is a state that it's not like you look at it and say, oh, Republicans are going to go out there and be favored just because they're the incumbents. It's not typically how these things work. Now, if Glenn Youngkin could run for re-election, I think he easily would go out there and win. But it's really going to take some massive momentum surge that we're just not seeing. We haven't had much polling. And if you do eventually get that, then maybe we could talk about a potential, Sears upset, or maybe she makes the race close and that saves the attorney general slot and Jason Miyares is able to go out there and win re-election, which would still be a nice consolation prize in the process. And then Glenn Youngkin comes back in 2029 because you can only serve one term in a row, but you could serve multiple terms. But if he runs in 2029 for governor, it's very likely that, in my opinion, he would be able to go out there and win because he has a decent approval rating. And notice how when Sears is starting to tie herself more to Youngkin, she starts to do a little bit better. But again, it's kind of getting a little bit too late. We're probably about a month away from early voting in Virginia. I encourage people to get out and vote for sure. But it's still, this race is the Democrats to lose. And even though it does seem as if they are kind of taking their foot off the gas and they're making blunders, it's not at the level that we saw in 2021. And when it comes down to New Jersey, definitely that's an interesting one to watch as well because, Phil Murphy was the incumbent in 2021. He's lost popularity since. You're running Jack Citarelli, who is endorsed by Donald Trump, but also has some independent appeal. He probably will outrun Trump overall percentage-wise in the election against Mickey Sherrill, who won a very fractured primary and has corruption scandals. But still, it's a state that is going to be a really tough nut to crack. We'll see what happens in the state of New Jersey, but Virginia does seem to be a little bit more just of a foregone conclusion, at least in the eyes of many people. But for all we know, New Jersey could be decided by a wider margin. I personally think that we need more polling in both of these states, and we'll probably have a better picture. But it's an off-year election. That's not really the strong point for Republicans. But they do seem to have the momentum in both races, and both are in states that went for Kamala Harris. So if they're able to keep things close, maybe it's a good sign for 2026 because these are well-publicized races. You have an R next to a D. This is not a Wisconsin Supreme Court election type of thing going on where you actually have people that are going to be engaged because they're used to voting for their governors. They're used to voting for said congressmen in the case of a midterm election. So again, it's a good gauge for that. I think it's more telling for the midterms, but again, it's not fully telling because we saw what happened in 2021. Certain things drove turnout up for Republicans in a way that was very unique. A lot of that had to do with the rise in education as a key issue and lockdowns becoming unpopular. Even though a year before they still were above water, lockdowns became increasingly unpopular in 2021. Democrats removed them, conveniently so for them, before the midterms, and then you had abortion take center stage, which I think sometimes the impact of that's overstated. But again, you had a lot of Republican candidates that were running that had baggage on the topic, and that definitely hurt them more than it would have in an election environment where Roe was not really an issue. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching this video. Like this video down below, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications so you never miss another video. Follow me on social media. The links are all in the description down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle out.